Dean Martin. His name was synonymous with success, charm, and impeccable style. The king of smiles, whose velvety voice was loved by millions and whose charisma made hearts skip a beat. On stage, he seemed unshakable, an internal jokester, for whom no problem existed, only applause, spotlight, and endless recognition. But at the height of his fame, a fateful event occurred in Dean's life that broke him. This is the tragic story of Dean Martin's life. On June 7, 1917, in the industrial town of Steubenville, Ohio, where the air was filled with the noise and soot of factory chimneys, a boy named Dino Paul Crocetti was born. It's hard to imagine that this modest child from a small town steeped in poverty and crime would one day become a symbol of glamour and charisma. Steubenville did not spoil its residents. Life here was simple but far from easy. The shouts of workers were replaced by the resonant whistles of factories, and the streets were filled not only with dreams but also with shadows. It was in these conditions that a boy began his journey. A boy whose destiny seemed unlikely to ever lead him to the glitter of Hollywood. But who could have guessed that noisy and ruthless Steubenville would become the starting point for a future legend? Dino was born into a family of Italian immigrants. His father, Gaetano Crocetti, worked as a barber, barely making ends meet. His days were spent cutting and shaving clients, often for pennies that rarely covered the family's expenses. His mother, Angela Crocetti, managed the household, creating a semblance of warmth amid the constant shortage of money. Family meals were often modest and luxuries were out of the question. We even saved on food, Dean would later recall. It was these harsh conditions that taught the boy resilience, endurance, and the belief that life is not about what you're given, but what you fight to claim. Yet, despite the poverty, their home had room for warmth and dreams. It seems that this is where Dean developed his ability to find joy even in the hardest times, a quality that would play a significant role in his career. Dean Martin's school years were far from the bright spot in his life. His thick Italian accent marked him as an outsider in the eyes of his peers. Teasing, mockery, and outright cruelty surrounded him like a veil, preventing him from breathing freely. In those years, he often felt like an outcast, a guest in someone else's world. Dean tried for a long time to find common ground with those around him, but school remained a place where he always felt out of place. In 10th grade, he made a bold but controversial choice. He dropped out. "I realized that working was more important than listening to them laugh at me," he might have said. This decision forced him to grow up early. Taking on the burdens of adult life, he began searching for his own path to success. Another chapter of his youth was marked by boxing. In a world where physical strength was often the ultimate argument, Dean decided to test himself in the ring. Adopting the pseudonym Kid Crocetti, he began participating in local boxing matches. The ring became an arena where every fall was a lesson and every victory a small triumph. But his boxing career proved to be just as harsh as the school hallways. Though he won matches, defeats and injuries followed him. Bruises, bloody lips, and shattered dreams become part of Kid Crocetti's life. Yet despite it all, boxing toughened him. Each blow symbolized the struggle not only for survival in the ring, but in life itself. It was here that he learned resilience and perseverance, keys to overcoming any obstacle. In an effort to make ends meet, Dean began working as a croupier at a local casino. This place became a kind of stage for him, allowing him to showcase his charm. Manipulating cards with skill and confidence, he captivated the casino's patrons. His natural charisma set him apart from other employees, making him a favorite among players and even regular visitors. But this job had its dark side. In the world of gambling, money flowed freely, but with it came dangers. The criminal underworld was closer than it seemed, and each evening at the green felt table reminded him of the thin lines between the opportunity to improve his life and the risk of losing it altogether. Dean, with his dexterity and charm, navigated this treacherous path like an acrobat. Yet who could know how many times, as he smiled at patrons, he asked himself inwardly, "How far will this take me? And will I be able to get out in time?" When the workday at the casino ended, Dean found himself in another world, the world of music. In his free time, he sang in small local bars and clubs. His audience consisted of everyday people, exhausted after long shifts with a single question in their eyes. Where do we find the strength for tomorrow? Dean, with his velvety voice and heartfelt delivery, became a lifeline for them. And when the room began to applaud, even timidly and awkwardly, those were the first sparks of recognition that ignited hope in his heart. He sang not just for money, though he needed it desperately. Every song he performed brought him closer to the dream of a big stage where the applause would one day be louder, and the spotlight would eclipse the shadows of his past. In those moments when the soft bar lights illuminated his face and a few pairs of eyes looked at him with gratitude, Dean felt truly alive. He was no longer just a croupier for Steubenville. He was an artist destined to one day capture the hearts of millions. In the late 1930s, Dean's life took a turn when he was given his first real chance to step into the world of music. A local studio offered him the opportunity to record a few songs. It wasn't the kind of studio we think of today. There was no glamour and only the most basic equipment. But for Dean, it meant everything. On the day of the recording, he stood nervously before the microphone, fidgeting with his hands. Will my voice be able to break through the walls of this room, he wondered, glancing at the producer who nodded subtly. When the session ended, Dean listened to his first songs with a trembling anticipation. The music sounded just as he had hoped, sincere, warm, as if speaking directly to each listener. Although these recordings didn't become hits, they opened the doors for him. Several producers noticed his talent even if they didn't yet fully grasp his potential. For Dean, it was a beginning, the first step on the path to greatness. He dreamed of the day his voice would be heard on the radio, and now that dream felt closer than ever. In 1946, fate had a surprise in store for Dean Martin, an encounter with a young and eccentric comedian Jerry Lewis. Their meeting happened almost by chance. Both were performing at the same nightclub, and the organizer suggested they team up for a shared act. Their first performance was pure improvisation. Jerry came up with jokes on the spot, bounding across the stage, while Dean, dressed impeccably in his signature suit, played along with a light smile, adding witty comments and filling the pauses with songs. This mix of comedy and music turned out to be explosive. The audience, initially expecting yet another routine show, was on its feet by the end of the night, roaring with laughter and applause. It was magic, Lewis later recalled. Indeed, in that moment, two completely different personalities, the reserved, elegant Dean and the boisterous, chaotic Jerry, found to spark a chemistry that would change their lives forever. Their duo became an outright sensation. Dean and Jerry quickly conquered the nightclub scene, drawing crowds wherever they performed. Their format, combining comedy with music, was entirely new for its time. On stage, they appeared as perfect opposites. Jerry would jump around, pull faces, and provoke laughs, while Dean maintained his composure, skillfully delivering quips and seamlessly transitioning into songs. Their shows became so popular that Hollywood took notice. The duo began recording albums and starring in films, which instantly became hits. Their comedic movies, such as My Friend Irma and At War with the Enemy, became classics of the era. The 1950s marked a period of great change for Dean Martin. He decided to venture into a solo career, a move that turned out to be his best decision. Releasing album after album, Dean began winning the hearts of millions of listeners. His velvety voice, filled with warmth and romance, became his signature. Songs like That's Amore and Valere quickly became hits. From the very first notes, these melodies transported listeners to another world, to sunlit Italian streets where love and happiness filled the air. Audiences worldwide found comforting dreams in his music. His voice echoed from radios, his records sold in the millions, and his name became synonymous with elegance and charm. It wasn't just music, it was magic crafted by Dean with every song he sang. Music wasn't the only field where Dean achieved success. Hollywood, having long noticed his charm and charisma, invited him to try his hand at acting. One of his earliest roles was in the film The Caddy, where he reunited with Jerry Lewis. On set, Dean initially felt a bit unsure of himself. Acting in front of a camera was harder than performing for a live audience. There was no applause or smiling faces, only the director with his endless instructions. But as in music, Dean found his rhythm. The film was a success, and Dean proved that his talent extended far beyond the stage. His natural acting style, paired with his innate charisma, won over audiences. Hollywood recognized him as not just a singer, but a true star capable of lighting up the screen. Every time he stepped out of the dressing room and onto the act, Dean felt the same thrill he had before his first performances. Only now it was a new world, the world of cinema, where he, just as on stage, found his calling. In 1956, the entertainment world was stunned. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis announced the breakup of their legendary duo. At the height of their fame, when their joint films drew massive crowds and nightclubs were bursting with the excitement of their fans, the pair, seemingly inseparable in their success, decided to part ways. The cause was creative differences. Dean, reserved and sophisticated, increasingly felt like the second fiddle in their act. Jerry's comedic antics often overshadowed Dean's musical talent, and the imbalance became harder to ignore. Despite their successful performances, tension and resentment began to build between them. The final argument was bitter and dramatic. Backstage, where laughter had once reigned, harsh words were exchanged that could not be taken back. "We can't work together anymore," Dean said quietly. At that moment, he knew he was embarking on a new and uncertain path. The breakup became a major sensation. Fans were bewildered, and the press only fueled the fire. Yet Dean was determined to move forward on his own, ready to prove to the world that he was more than just one half of a duo. The split with Jerry Lewis might have spelled the end for a less confident performer. For Dean, however, it marked the beginning of a new era. He soon became a key member of the legendary Rat Pack, a group of entertainers who embodied the luxury, style, and talent of Las Vegas. Alongside Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., Dean conquered the stage in a revolutionary new format. Their shows were more than concerts. They were magical displays of friendship, humor, and music. They joked with one another on stage, teased each other, sang duets, and improvised in a way only a group of true friends could pull off. For audiences, it was a sensation. To stand in the same room and watch three icons banter and perform was an experience they would recount with awe for years. It was a reaffirmation of his place among the greats. On the Rat Pack stage, Dean found not just new collaborations, but a family. Their camaraderie was genuine, their humor razor sharp, and their music timeless. This chapter of his life became a legend, a symbol of Las Vegas's golden era. The year 1965 marked another milestone in Dean Martin's journey to immortal fame. It was the year The Dean Martin Show premiered on television. This wasn't just a show, it was a phenomenon that instantly captured the hearts of viewers. The show combined everything audiences loved about Dean: his velvety voice, sharp wit, and the ability to create an atmosphere of effortless celebration. Stars of the highest caliber graced his stage, and each episode was packed with songs, comedy sketches, and heartfelt conversations. Dean wasn't merely the host, he was the embodiment of charm and elegance. With a cigarette in one hand and a glass in the other, he joked with his guests as if they were old friends, making millions of viewers feel like they were part of the circle. The show not only cemented his status as a superstar, but also made him seem more relatable to the public. Week after week, families gathered around their TVs to soak in the warmth and joy that only Dean Martin could deliver. It was a time when America paused to watch as Dean, always at his own relaxed pace, sang, joked, and brought happiness into their homes. By the late 1960s, Dean Martin was no longer just a singer or actor. He was an icon. His elegant style, impeccably tailored suits with a velvety voice, and his charismatic demeanor became the standard of the era. Every appearance he made, whether on screen or stage, was an event. At film premieres, he greeted his fans with his signature smile, effortlessly embracing the attention and adoration of the public. His confidence and grace set the benchmark for others. Men aspired to emulate him, and women dreamed of meeting him. However, beneath the glamour and public adulation, his personal life was far from perfect. In 1941, Dean Martin, then a little-known singer, married Elizabeth Ann MacDonald. Their marriage began with dreams of a simple family life. The couple had 4 children who became the center of their world, but the happiness of their family life proved fragile. Dean, constantly torn between tours, performances, and his quest for fame, was rarely home. His choice of a life as an entertainer, where the stage and applause always took priority, inevitably left his family in the shadows. Each trip, every concert added cracks to their relationship. By 1949, those cracks had turned into a chasm. When Dean left home, he knew it wasn't just a goodbye. It was a choice between his dream and his family. Divorce became unavoidable, and while the split was painful, it forced Dean to confront the price he was willing to pay for success. In that same year, 1949, Dean met Jeanne Bieger, a former model who seemed the complete opposite of his past experience. Their marriage marked the beginning of a relationship that lasted 24 years, the longest of Dean's life. Jeanne was more than a wife, she was his pillar of support through moments of triumph and hardship. She helped him maintain balance in a whirlwind life where success often came hand in hand with doubts and disappointments. Jeanne stood by him during his greatest victories and supported him through his lowest points. But even such unwavering dedication couldn't shield their marriage from difficulties. Persistent rumors of infidelity, Dean's growing dependence on alcohol, and his often challenging personality slowly eroded what seemed to be a perfect union. In 1973, they officially divorced, though many had believed this couple would withstand any test. In 1973, shortly after his divorce from Jeanne Bieger, Dean Martin decided to give love another chance. His new partner was Katherine Hahn, a young woman who briefly brought a renewed hope for family happiness into his life. This marriage was Dean's attempt to start over. After 2 failed unions, he may have wanted to prove to himself that he could still build a stable family. Katherine, captivated by his charisma and magnetism, was eager to be the one who could bring him peace. However, this union proved to be short-lived. Just 3 years later, their marriage ended in divorce. A relationship that began with hope couldn't withstand the pressures of fame. Dean's demanding schedule and perhaps his inability to fully let go of the shadows of his past. Dean's constant touring, filming, and late-night performances made him a rare presence at home. His wives, Elizabeth, Jeanne, and Katherine, often expressed feelings of neglect. Their conflicts frequently spilled into the public eye, fueling rumors and speculation. Picture the scene. Dean returns home after another successful tour. The house, meant to be a sanctuary, feels empty and cold. His children have grown up mostly in his absence, and his wives, left to fend for themselves emotionally, could no longer sustain the spark that once lit their relationships. And then, as if life hadn't dealt him enough challenges, came that pivotal event. One that would divide his life into before and after. In 1987, Dean Martin's life was forever changed. His son, Dean Paul Martin, tragically died in a plane crash while piloting a military aircraft. This devastating event dealt a crushing blow to Dean, breaking even the strong man he had always been. From that moment on, he became much more withdrawn. The man who once smiled easily, joked freely, and found joy even in difficult moments was now weighed down by an irreparable loss. His career, which had once been his refuge and the purpose of his life, lost its meaning. Dean began turning down new projects, appeared on stage less and less, and gradually faded from public life. Picture this, a once great entertainer who had illuminated stages with his presence, now sitting in a dimly lit room. In his hands, a photograph of his son, now gone forever. Around him, an echoing silence that seemed to reverberate in his heart. As the years went on, loneliness became Dean's constant companion. After 3 divorces and the death of his son, he was left mostly alone, relying on infrequent visits from family and old friends. Yet even with them, he often found it difficult to share his inner world. His pain was too deep, his memories too personal. Gradually, Dean began retreating further into himself. In Las Vegas, where the applause and laughter of audiences had once surrounded him, he was now often seen alone. Invitations to social events were increasingly declined, and he spent most of his time at home sorting through old photographs and reliving the days when life had seemed so much fuller. Dean Martin's persona, a carefree entertainer with a perpetual glass in hand, became an inseparable part of his image. During his shows and performances, he often joked about his love for alcohol, turning it into a signature element. The image of him slightly swaying on stage, delivering sharp one-liners, became etched into the memories of millions of fans. "Some drink to forget, I drink to remember how much fun I'm having," he would say, drawing laughter and applause. To the public, he was the embodiment of ease and nonchalance, the eternal life of the party, who could turn any moment into a celebration. But the reality was different. On stage, he drank far less than it appeared. The glass in his hand often contained water or weak drinks, and his drunken demeanor was part of a carefully crafted performance. However, offstage, his battle with inner demons made alcohol more than just a prop. It became a coping mechanism for the harsh realities of life. After personal tragedies, especially the loss of his son, Dean Paul Martin, the dynamic changed. What had once been a part of his stage persona became a fixture of his everyday life. Alcohol turned into a way to numb the pain. Left alone with his grief, Dean increasingly turned to the bottle. His home, once filled with light and laughter, became a quiet fortress where he spent long hours in solitude. The music that used to echo through its halls were replaced by silence, broken only by the clink of ice in a glass. But it wasn't just alcohol that began to take a toll on his life. There were other dependencies and struggles yet to surface. Like many entertainers of his youth, Dean Martin started smoking in his youth. In the 1940s and 1950s, cigarettes were a staple of style, seemingly adding an air of charisma to a man's persona. For Dean, a cigarette in hand became a symbol of his ease and composure, complementing the perfect image he presented to the public. This habit, which he had paid little attention to in his younger years, began taking a toll as he aged. Smoking, which had been a comfort in difficult times, also became an enemy, slowly breaking him down from within. This once overlooked habit would eventually lead to severe consequences. By the 1990s, Dean was diagnosed with emphysema and lung cancer, diseases caused by decades of smoking. These diagnoses marked the beginning of a new chapter where he faced illnesses that drained his energy and vitality. The once vibrant performer who had captivated audiences and hearts became a frail and weary man, fighting for every breath. The cigarettes that had once been a part of his image now served as a stark reminder of the steep price he paid for the habit. In the final years of his life, Dean chose solitude. Once a man of the stage, accustomed to the roar of applause and the glow of the spotlight, he withdrew from public life. His days were now spent in silence, where he found solace in music and old films. He avoided large gatherings, even with close friends. It seemed that with age, silence had become more comforting than the noise of the crowd. This was his way of coping with the pain that had followed him throughout his life. What steps did Dean take next? By the 1990s, Dean Martin had all but stopped leaving his home. The vibrant, charismatic presence that once lit up every room was replaced by fertility and fatigue. Years of smoking, stress, and emotional turmoil had taken their toll, leaving him physically weakened and emotionally drained. His rare public appearances only deepened the concern of his fans. His gaunt face and slow movements fueled rumors of his impending death. Each glimpse of him evoked a mixture of sadness and respect. Before them stood not just an entertainer, but a man who had lived a life that was rich, yet trial-filled. And now that life was dealing him its final unrelenting blows. The year 1990 dealt a heavy blow to Dean Martin with the death of his close friend and colleague Sammy Davis Jr., after a prolonged battle with cancer. Dean, already retreating further into isolation, felt his once lively circle of friends, filled with laughter and music, growing smaller. Dean Martin's health deteriorated rapidly in his later years. Chronic illnesses, compounded by decades of smoking and alcohol use, had taken their toll. He rarely left his home, preferring the quiet solitude of his days. His children and a few close friends visited regularly, bringing warmth and care into his life. Yet Dean remained withdrawn, seldom sharing his thoughts or feelings. Perhaps he believed this was a burden he needed to carry alone, as he had done so often throughout his life. On December 25th, 1995, Christmas Day, Dean Martin passed away. He was 78 years old. His death came quietly in his sleep without drama or fanfare, as if the great performer had chosen to leave the world as gracefully as he had lived in it. The day, one that millions associate with joy and celebration, became a poignant farewell to a man who had brought so much light and warmth into the world. His passing on Christmas imbued the loss with a bittersweet symbolism. A star that illuminated the world dimmed on its brightest day. In Las Vegas, the city he called home and helped define, the lights of the casinos were dimmed in his memory. Fans worldwide mourned his passing, listening to his timeless songs and feeling a deep personal loss. Dean Martin, the man who journeyed from a poor boy in Steubenville to a stage and screen legend, left this life on his own terms, quietly and with dignity. He left behind an enduring legacy, ensuring his light would never truly fade.